After discovering Shinpei's abilities, Hizuru asks him if he's met her little brother. He mentions a book she wrote called The Swamp Man and mentions that it is strikingly similar to the way things are currently playing out. Hizuru reveals that she met a shadow 14 years ago that killed her family, and that's why she's hunting them down. Now Nezu explains that humans become immune to getting copied if they manage to kill their own shadows. Then Shinpei explains everything he saw in this past life, including the giant shadow monster. Later, Hizuru goes to Shiori's house and begins fighting the shadows aggressively. That's when we learn that her brother Ryunosuke stays in her body as part of her split personality. Nezu adds onto this by mentioning that Hizuru saw his body 14 years ago and his death was very similar to Ushio's. Now Shiori's shadow tricks Ryunosuke by avoiding his blow and choking him. He manages to get away from her, but is surprised that the shadow survived his hammer. He sends a message to the boy, saying it's time for Plan B, and Nezu gets into action. As Ryunosuke looks around for the Shiori shadow, she tries to copy him, but he gains the advantage and attacks. However, the shadow escapes and tries to get away by even avoiding Nezu's nail gun. Luckily, Shinpei stops her and holds her down, thus allowing Nezu to trap her. However, the shadow taunts Shinpei by declaring that she was the one who killed Ushio. Ryunosuke kills her for good before she can carry on with her facade, and then he reveals that he only comes out whenever Hizuru has to deal with something unpleasant. Later, Shinpei goes back to Mio's house and finds her holding a knife, but it's only for cooking onions. Shinpei confirms that she's not a shadow and begins making the curry. Later, he hears a rumbling stomach, but is shocked to find Ushio's shadow standing behind him. Shinpei panics, but she berates him for freaking out again. Then she warns him about the summer festival, and he realizes that she had also looped back with him. Mio and Alan enter the room, so Ushio hides, and Shinpei does his best to act calm around them. He asks Ushio to sneak into his room and take some food for her later. She seems to confirm that she is a shadow, and her intentions confuse Shinpei even further. He thinks back to an argument he had with Ushio before he left the island, and then her shadow convinces him that she's for real. After confirming that she can't create copies for now, Shinpei gets attacks from Ryunosuke, who is guarding the house with Nezu. He avoids the message, and then we see a shadow sneak into the house. Now Mio enters the room to take the plates away and leaves after a brief scare. But then her shadow arrives and attacks the duo. Ushio fights her but is badly injured in the process. When asked why she's helping Shinpei, Ushio says she loves him. That's when Shinpei gives Nezu the signal, and he shoots the shadow in the head, thus allowing Shinpei to kill her. But the Mio shadow claims that she also loves him before dying. Now Ryunosuke comes in and is about to kill Ushio, but Shinpei explains everything to him and begs for his help. Hizuru takes over and treats Ushio's wounds, but she ends up losing her arm in the process. Now Hizuru reveals a message from Ushio that led her here in the first place. They try to figure out how Mio's shadow deviated from the projected pattern, and then the older members decide to stay away from Shinpei so that they can avoid any risks. The next day, Mio is seen talking to Tokiko, who seems to have some hidden intentions. Then Shinpei shows Ushio the shell necklace and tries to refresh her memory. They meet Soul later, and he is shocked to see Ushio still alive. After learning everything about shadows and Shinpei's powers, So agrees to help, and then Shinpei gives Ushio's phone to her. The password seems to have changed, but she can still open it with her fingerprint. They find a video and play it. To everyone's surprise, we learn that Ushio was with her shadow the day she died. The real Ushio vouches for her shadow and says that she's working with her to solve the mystery deaths that started with Shiori meeting her shadow. A flashback shows Shiori telling Ushio about being followed, but she doesn't believe her at first. The next day, Ushio is copied at the beach and she spots her shadow along with Mio. After realizing what has happened, Ushio promises Shiori that she will investigate the matter. Later, Mio teases Ushio about being in love with Shinpei, but she avoids the topic and heads to the bathroom where she meets her shadow. They engage in a brief struggle, but eventually decide to work together. The next day, they look for Shiori's shadow and enter the Hishigata family clinic, which is believed to be haunted. They find another Ushio shadow there, who attacks the girls. After a brief struggle, The good shadow realizes her strengths and weaknesses and uses this newfound knowledge to kill the evil shadow. Then she reveals that she has the urge to kill the real Ushio, but is resisting it for some unknown reason. Back to the present, Ushio's shadow remembers everything and also gets her powers back. She decides to replay the past from her data and takes the boys to the day of Ushio's death. Here we see Shadow Ushio transforming into real Ushio's necklace so that she can avoid getting spotted. However, Shiori has already vanished, and Shadow Ushio alerts real Ushio about the presence of another shadow, so she rushes to help Shiori when they spot her drowning. Both the Ushio girls fight Shiori's shadow, and while they gain the upper hand at first, Shiori awakens her true powers and dominates the battle. The real Ushio sacrifices herself to save the others, but this is all in vain, as Shadow Ushio is also defeated soon after. The boys become emotional after seeing how things had played out, but suddenly Heine appears in the memory and grabs Shinpei's arm. Ushio manages to bring the team back to the real world, but Shinpei notices that he has been marked by Heine. He identifies her as the same spirit that killed everyone during the festival, and then we learn that Ushio was partially erased during the encounter, which was why she lost some of her memories. It starts to rain, and Mio talks to Tokiko about the festival, but they run into a man named Miura, who appears to be a cop. Later, the team goes to the Hishigata clinic with Ushio disguised as the necklace. So suspects that his dad, Sedo, is hiding something here, and that's when Ushio transforms back into her human avatar. So doesn't understand why she's still in a swimsuit, so she explains that it's to help her save space to copy more items. After some searching, So finds the poisonous mercury chloride, which the team suspects is being used to make shadows. After that, they find a creepy wooden statue carrying a fish in its arm. Shinpei believes this to be the goddess Hiruko, and then asks Ushio to sneak through a crack. She finds a keyhole, and after some discussion, Ushio locates the key inside the statue. She copies it, and the team enters the secret passage, leading to an underground canal. Shinpei wants to protect Ushio, as he isn't sure if she will be able to loop back again with him if she dies. Ushio senses an ominous presence, and then Shinpei locates a baby shadow eating a rat. The baby attacks them, and so is about to be killed, but Shinpei manages to hit it with his nail gun, and Ushio finishes it off. However, her arm injury acts up, and she senses another shadow. The team makes its way forward, but run into an entire army of baby shadows that attack them. Meanwhile, Nezu and Hizuru decide to act on one of her premonitions by going down a sewer. An intense battle breaks out at the cave, and Ushio's injury gets worse, but so uses his flame spray to give them an advantage. Now Mio sees Shiori's shadow and chases after her, but bumps into Tetsu. They find the shadow pointing at a manhole, and it vanishes after that. Mio wants to go inside, and she manages to convince Tetsu to join her, despite his hesitation. The team reaches a corral area after escaping the babies, and Ushio states that this entire zone is a copied shadow. She also reveals that her arm can't truly heal unless she copies the original body to recover data. Suddenly, the team is confronted by Tokiko and her shadows. Now Ryunosuke and Nezu walk through the sewers and come across a sealed area that Nezu identifies as the Hiruko Cave. As they try to figure a way inside, they hear Mio and Tetsu nearby. The duo observes Shiori's shadow tricking them into following her and decide to go after them. Meanwhile, Tokiko declares that she's here to retrieve Ushio, who is defective. Shinpei shoots her shadow, but is shocked to learn that Tokiko is actually human. While this happens, Dr. Sedo and his nurse Neguro decide to use Miura's body to feed the shadows. Ushio is apprehended, and Tokiko takes the boys to meet Hiruko. Now Ryunosuke and Nezu meet the Shiori shadow again, and she reveals how she tricked them into thinking she died. That's when she shows herself to be Heine in disguise, and then the shadow monster appears. Nezu realizes the monster isn't made of humans, so it won't get hurt so easily. He sacrifices himself to save Ryunosuke, but even he is hit in the liver as he makes his escape. Then the team finally meets Heine, who is getting ready for her meal. Tokiko explains that Heine was Hiruko's first copied form, so she prefers to be called by that name. She introduces her as Hiruko no Mikoto, the goddess of Hitogashima, and the mother of shadows, who is now looking for a new body. Shinpei confronts Heine for killing Ushio, and then we see Negoro with 2 caskets. Tokiko reveals that the Hishigata clinic has been feeding Haine with dead bodies for years, as it has been a tradition of the family. One of the caskets is shown to have Ushio's corpse, and the boys are shocked to learn that her body was replaced at the funeral. So berates his sister for participating in such a gruesome mission, but she reasons that their mother died a long time ago, and Haine is keeping her alive through her shadow. Now Haine eats Miura and scans Ushio's body, thus making her defenseless. Shinpei uses this opportunity to get Ushio to save her corpse in a hectic sequence. Haine gets upset and turns Negoro into a monster that attacks the team. Ushio fights her and manages to win after a brief struggle. Now Shinpei tries to stop Haine, but the shadow monster appears with Mio and cuts off his fingers. That's when Tokiko learns that her family has been tricked, as Haine is going to kill everyone in the island, thus going against their arrangement. She berates them for their selfishness, but the monster kills her, and so after that. Meanwhile, Hizuru takes over her body when Tetsu runs into her and asks him to take her to the end of the cave. Shinpei tries to get himself killed, but Haine takes away his eye, after which she tries to reprogram Ushio through corrosion. Luckily, Shinpei gets his eye back, but the monster says he hasn't mastered his powers yet, as he can only go back in time if he dies. The villains plan to keep Shinpei alive till after the festival is over, but then Hizuru arrives and tries to stop them. She shoots the monster, but gets killed before she can shoot Shinpei. However, we learn that Shinpei had hidden a bottle of mercuric chloride with him, and the distraction was good enough for him to drink it. Then Haine panics as Ushio is surprisingly able to reverse her corrosion on her, so she orders the monster to kill her as she is too strong. Luckily, Shinpei brings Ushio along with him, and they promise to stop the villains together. Shinpei goes back to when Hizuru first identified him as a time traveler, and this time, Ushio appears as well. They reveal that they just came back from the future. And that's the end of part 2. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to see part 3 ASAP. I'll get started as soon as we hit 5k likes on this video. Also, tap the bell icon to get notified when that happens. I'll see you soon.